Hi, I'm Corinne. The night before my sister's wedding, I showed up early, hoping to feel included, just a little. But when I got there, my name wasn't on the table. No seat, no space, no sign I was ever meant to be part of it. Then she looked me in the eye and said, "You don't belong here." What makes someone decide you're no longer family, without even saying why? Have you ever been excluded from something that should have been yours? Tell me below. I arrived a little early, not because I was excited, though I told myself that, but because I needed to find a reason to feel like I belonged. The restaurant was beautiful, all warm wood and white linen, with fairy lights dangling over long farmhouse tables. Everything was curated, as always, to match Janelle's aesthetic of effortless elegance. She was good at that, making everything seem seamless, polished, even if it meant sanding off anything that didn't fit the theme. Like me. I paused at the entrance, scanning the tables for my name. I wasn't expecting a spotlight, just acknowledgement. A place card. A small sign that I was part of this. There was one for Talia, framed in gold no less. Even one for a distant cousin's boyfriend. But not mine. A waitress passed by. I asked quietly if maybe one had been misplaced. She smiled, then frowned, then offered to grab a spare chair. I thanked her, placed it on the very edge of the main table, and pretended it had always been there. As I sat, Janelle approached in her cream silk dress, glowing like a Pinterest board come to life. "Oh, don't stress," she said with a smile that was just a little too rehearsed. "You can sit anywhere. Let's not make it a thing." A few heads turned our way, and I felt my ears heat up. I gave her the safest response I had, a nod and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The table laughed and carried on. So did I. As the meal went on, I watched the toasts, the clinking glasses, the gentle chaos of family. I helped refill someone's water, passed the salt. I was good at that, being helpful, being quiet. But it lingered. That empty spot where a name card should have been. A small absence that said more than any presence. Later that night, after dessert and too much wine, Janelle stood to thank everyone. She was flushed and beaming, riding the high of celebration. Her voice carried easily across the room as she raised her glass. "I just want to thank the people who matter most," she said, scanning the faces around her. "This weekend is about new beginnings, about who shows up not just in person but in spirit." She looked at me just briefly, then added lightly, "And sometimes you realize, not everyone belongs in every chapter of your life." There was a beat of silence, a few chuckles. One uncle raised his brow. But no one said anything, not my father, not even Griffin, who met my gaze from across the room with an apology he didn't owe. My face didn't change. I'd practiced that over the years, how to sit still while something inside me curled into itself. I lifted my glass, toasted the air, and swallowed everything but the wine. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was that no one defended me. The morning of the wedding smelled like hairspray and soft panic. I showed up early. Again. Just like rehearsal dinner. But this time I carried a garment bag and a quiet hope that maybe the awkwardness of the night before had passed with the wine. I walked through the bridal suite doors with a smile ready, my voice pitched gently, my footsteps light. Janelle was already in the chair by the mirror, curls pinned, lipstick half applied. She turned slightly, laughing with one of her bridesmaids. That's when I saw it. The silver chain. It glinted just beneath her collarbone, resting perfectly against the edge of her bridal robe. Not gaudy, not flashy, just familiar, painfully familiar. I stopped walking, my lungs forgot how to work. That necklace had lived in my drawer for 14 years. It was my mother's, the last thing she wore before the hospital took everything. I kept it wrapped in an old t-shirt inside a keepsake box no one ever opened. I never wore it. Not once. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't ready. Because wearing it felt like turning a page I didn't know how to read. And now, it was just there. On Janelle. Like it had always belonged to her. I didn't say anything right away. I walked over to the rack of dresses, unzipped mine, pretended to smooth it out. "Hey," I finally said, keeping my tone neutral. "That necklace, wasn't it in my box?" Janelle didn't even look up. She adjusted the clasp. "Yeah, it just works better with this neckline," I blinked. Right. Then she added, like punctuation, Mom left it for both of us, didn't she? She smiled at me in the mirror, like it was nothing. I nodded. I think I even smiled back. Then I stepped out of the room before my face betrayed me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. The scent of peonies wafted from the florist's setup down the hall. Somewhere, a makeup artist giggled. I slid down until I was sitting on the carpet, the cool baseboard pressing against my spine. I thought about the first time I found that necklace after Mom died. I'd snuck into her room, past the boxes of donated clothes and dried flowers, and found it curled in the corner of her jewelry dish. I wrapped it in tissue and wrote a note. When I'm ready, I'll wear this to feel her. I still have that note. I found it a week ago while cleaning. The paper was soft around the edges, the ink faded. But I hadn't been ready. Not for this. Not for watching someone else put her memory on like an accessory. Maybe it was never mine. Maybe nothing ever really was. I didn't tell anyone. Not Elise. Not Griffin. Not even myself, really. When I got back to the suite, I tied bows on bridesmaids' backs and reapplied someone's lip gloss. I handed tissues. I smiled in the group photos. I nodded at the timeline. I did everything I was supposed to do, because this wasn't the hill to die on. Not yet. But it was the first time I realized the wedding wasn't about family. It was about ownership. The kitchen was empty except for the ticking of a clock I couldn't see. I'd slipped away for tea. Not to drink it, just to do something with my hands. The ceremony was only a few hours away, and the bridal suite was starting to buzz like a hive. Too many curling irons, too many opinions, too many eyes that didn't really see me. I stirred honey into hot water like it mattered. Then I felt her before I saw her. Talia. She moved like she belonged everywhere, like she'd designed the air. She reached for a champagne flute someone had left behind, took a sip, then walked over like we were old friends instead of barely tolerable cohabitants of the same dinner table. "You've been really calm today," she said. "Nice." I kept stirring. Then she leaned in, close enough for me to count the lashes clumped in her mascara. "Don't ruin this day," she whispered, her breath warm. "You know how easily people stop listening to you." I didn't answer. I didn't move. She smiled, patted my arm like a nurse would a patient, and walked out. I stood there, the spoon still circling long after the tea stopped steaming. That wasn't the first time I'd been warned in a kitchen. When I was 19, my stepmother once told me, just before my dad's retirement party, "Let him have tonight. Your disappointment can wait." I'd nodded, like I was nodding now, and swallowed whatever truth I was holding. I'd forgotten how small a whisper could make you feel. Because when it's loud, people pay attention. But when it's quiet, you start wondering if you imagined it, if you deserve it, if it's your fault. I poured the tea down the drain. Back in the hallway, my phone buzzed. Elise. A text. "I need you to see this before tonight." Below it, 4 attachments. PDFs, legal filings, old newspaper screenshots. I ducked into a supply closet no one would check. The files loaded slowly. My hands were too cold, my stomach too hot. Talia had been charged with identity fraud, twice, and financial theft once, just under a different name. The last case was dropped. And then I saw it, bolded in a note at the bottom. Plaintiff withdrew complaint. Franklin Shipley. My father. The person who taught me how to spell integrity on a napkin when I was 8. The same person who once told me, "The truth always finds its legs, even if you hide it." He hadn't just lied to me. He'd protected her. Legally, silently, completely. I sat down on a crate of napkins and read it again, and again. This wasn't about Janelle choosing Talia. This was about my father already having chosen her years ago. It wasn't about a wedding. It was about who got to walk around untouched, who had cover, and who was left exposed. I locked my phone. My mouth was dry, but my mind had never been clearer. Now I knew what I was up against. I wasn't just fighting a wedding. I was standing inside a war I hadn't declared. The ceremony ended in that golden hour light everyone hopes for, the kind that makes everything look better than it really is. Janelle and Matt stood at the altar beneath a flower-draped arch, hands clasped, eyes shining. People cried, phones clicked, and I stood just outside the frame, clapping softly like a hired extra. Griffin leaned toward me. You okay? I nodded, eyes fixed on the couple. Just waiting for the part where it all falls apart. He didn't say anything, just slipped his fingers into mine. They were warm, steady. Inside the reception hall, the atmosphere cracked just slightly. Franklin was red in the face, already on his third glass of whiskey. Talia hovered beside him, laughing too loudly, touching his arm like she was auditioning for a reality show. Janelle looked overwhelmed, her smile tightening at the edges, but she kept it going. Of course she did. Talia clinked her glass to mine near the dessert table. So quiet today, Corinne, she said with a sugary tone. Taking a vow of silence? I smiled without my eyes. Just trying not to say something I can't unsay. She chuckled, then turned back to Franklin, whispering something that made him grin like a boy. The tension wasn't loud. It never was. It hummed beneath the string quartet, behind every toast, between every look I caught and quickly dropped. No one noticed. Or maybe they chose not to. But everything that simmers too long will eventually boil. It happened during the group photos. The photographer was corralling family members near the archway. Janelle waved people into clusters, calling names, organizing smiles. I stood by a table, watching, not moving, not asked. Talia walked toward me, heels clicking like metronomes of war. "You're ruining this," she hissed. "I haven't said a word," I replied. "Exactly." I didn't mean to say it, not there, not then, but it came out anyway. "You're not part of this family," I said, voice low but sharp. "You bought your seat." Her face twisted, and in the time it took me to blink, she'd slipped off one of her heels, wound up, and threw it. It connected with my temple. Everything slowed. The gasp of the crowd, the sting of impact, the warmth running down my face. I didn't scream. I just staggered, blinking against the bright lights and too many faces. Griffin was at my side in an instant, catching my elbow, whispering my name. And Franklin. Franklin walked past me. He went straight to Talia. He grabbed her wrist gently, as if calming a child, and said, "You can't do that. Not here." He didn't look at me. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He didn't even see the blood. People started murmuring. Someone called for ice. The photographer lowered his camera. Janelle stood frozen in her dress, bouquet limp in her hands. I looked at my father. He was still holding Talia's arms. I bled and he checked her hands. The morning after the wedding felt like it belonged to someone else. Light pushed through the blinds in soft, forgiving bands. But nothing about me felt forgiven. My suitcase still lay half-zipped on the floor. My dress from the night before, crumpled over the chair. The heel mark on my temple had started to turn the color of spoiled plums. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone like I was searching for proof I hadn't imagined it. Not the bruise. The erasure. Janelle's post had gone up 2 hours earlier. I wasn't tagged. Of course I wasn't. I clicked through the slideshow slowly, careful not to flinch. Slide 1, her with Matt. Slide 2, her with Franklin, hand on her back like pride. Slide 3, Talia adjusting her veil, caught mid-laugh, perfectly composed. I kept going. I wasn't in any of them, not even the background. Even the crowd shots had been curated, cropped, as if someone had gently dragged a fingertip across the screen and decided, I didn't belong. You can sit anywhere. That sentence kept looping in my head. I remembered pulling a chair from another table, the scrape of wood against tile, the way no one helped, the way everyone kept eating. The worst part isn't being ignored. It's being told that being ignored doesn't matter. At brunch, Elise picked up on my silence right away. She was always good at that, listening to the things I didn't say. "I saw the photos," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. What would that change? We didn't talk about it again. We just let it sit on the table between us like a third plate, full of everything neither of us could swallow. "This is what curated family looks like," I said finally. "You keep what looks good. You cut the rest." Elise reached across and squeezed my hand. I didn't pull away. I just nodded. Later that night, I opened my laptop. Not out of anger. Not yet. Just a quiet need to preserve truth while I could still remember the shape of it. I started a folder, dragged in screenshots, the Instagram post, the text from Janelle, the PDF from Elise, notes from the night, dates, names, captions. I named it, If No One Else Will. It wasn't revenge, it was documentation. I wasn't preparing for a war. I was bracing for a refusal to acknowledge one had already started. If they've erased me from their version of the story, then I'll write one of my own. The text came 2 days later, just as I was folding the last of the linens from the wedding. It buzzed in with that same cheerful ding everything does, whether it's a weather alert or a gut punch. I saw Janelle's name before I saw the message. For a second, I let myself hope it was an apology. Maybe something clumsy but human. Maybe even the start of a slow repair. You made it all about you. You overreacted. That was it. No punctuation, no follow-up. Just the kind of message that didn't even feel written, like it had been copy-pasted from a group chat that didn't include me. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I took a screenshot and deleted it. That, I realized, was the new language of our family. Deletion, erasure, cropping, just enough editing to keep things clean. The only thing messier than the silence was the pretense that the silence wasn't there. Elise and I met for lunch that afternoon at a small cafe with wooden booths and mismatched mugs. She slid a folder across the table like she was handing me a verdict. She didn't speak right away. Just let the weight of it land. Inside, legal documents, old scans, highlighted names. One of them was Talia's, or at least the name she used during a financial fraud case 7 years ago. There were details, false identities, fake signatures, redirected accounts. But what stopped me cold was the last line on the final page. Case closed. Complaint withdrawn by Franklin Shipley. I didn't say anything. Elise didn't push. Instead, I flipped the page back over and read it again. Slowly, letting each letter sink like a stone. My father had filed the complaint, then pulled it. He had known. He had seen the red flags, read the reports, and stood close anyway. I wondered if he ever told Janelle. I wondered if he'd ever meant to tell me, or if this was always part of a silent pact between him and the woman who now wore our mother's house slippers and sat in our mother's chair. Back at home, I lay on the floor for a while, letting the ceiling fan trace slow circles overhead. Then I stood, opened my laptop, and began to build a file. I started with the screenshot of Janelle's message, then the withdrawn complaint. I added notes from the night at the reception, the audio Elise recorded when Talia whispered about keeping me quiet. I named the folder, If No One Else Will. Not for revenge. I didn't want that. Not really. I wanted the truth to have a spine. If they won't confront it, I will make sure they see it anyway. He used to say it with a softness in his voice, like he was trying to teach grace. Everyone makes mistakes. He said it once when Janelle totaled her first car and didn't tell anyone until the insurance denied the claim. He said it again when I caught her forging our mother's signature on a field trip form and begged him to care. And he said it to me, years ago, after I confronted him about leaving a holiday early to spend it with Talia. I remember believing it back then, believing that mistakes meant something would change. But last week, that sentence came back in a voicemail. She didn't mean to throw it. You were pushing her. Everyone makes mistakes. This time, it didn't sound like grace. It sounded like a habit. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. Not solemn, just subdued, as if even justice had tired of listening. I walked beside Elise without speaking. Griffin followed, hand lightly resting against my back every few steps. A grounding force. A reminder. When we entered the courtroom, Franklin and Talia were already seated. She wore something too bright for the setting. He wore the same tie he always did when he wanted to appear harmless. He didn't look at me. Not once. He sat like a man who hoped invisibility came free with age. The proceedings began. Dry, procedural, cold. The prosecutor laid out the facts like a puzzle they'd already solved. Fraud, alias use, wire transfers, withdrawn charges. The screen behind them lit up with timelines and names. Then the sentence landed. Franklin Shipley, named as a willful accessory to obstruction of justice. The room inhaled. Talia blinked, then shifted slightly, her fingers twitching. Franklin didn't move. His name echoed in the stillness. I looked over and finally saw something crack in him. Not outrage, not denial, just quiet collapse. The kind only shame can deliver. He didn't speak, but he didn't deny. He didn't fight, but he didn't protect. Later, in the chambers, they asked him simple questions. Did you withdraw the complaint? Yes. Were you aware of her aliases? I suspected. Did you alert anyone? Silence, and then, I thought I was protecting someone. Maybe I was just avoiding the truth. He looked up at me then, as if seeing me cost something. I didn't cry. I just asked the one question I'd carried for too long. Would you have protected me? He didn't speak, and that was my answer. I didn't need him to say yes. I just needed to stop asking. I arrived before anyone else. The courtroom was cold in the way all government buildings are, built to feel orderly, even when what happens inside is anything but. I sat in the first row next to Elise. Griffin took the seat behind me, silent like always, but solid in a way that said, I see you, even if they never will. I didn't have to turn around to know when he entered. I felt him, the way the air changed slightly, the way Elise's posture stiffened. Franklin walked in quietly. He didn't wear a suit this time, just a jacket that didn't quite fit, and a tie I hadn't seen since the Christmas he forgot to buy Janelle a gift. He didn't look at me. He sat behind me. Not beside me. Behind me. And somehow, that was louder than any insult he could have spoken. The hearing began like clockwork. Attorneys shuffled through statements, timelines, forensic audits. The air buzzed faintly with the sound of printers, page turns, keys tapping. My father's name was on every exhibit. Franklin Shipley. Not in bold, but consistent. Like watermark damage. Like background noise you learn to ignore, but it's always there. He didn't speak. He wasn't required to. And yet, every moment he didn't raise his hand, every second he let his own name be read aloud without interruption, felt like its own kind of speech. He'll take the fall in silence, I thought, but not once will he offer the truth out loud. There was a recess halfway through. Elise went to call someone. Griffin stretched and followed her. I needed air, but I needed coffee more. I passed Franklin on the way out, close enough that his coat brushed mine. He flinched, but he didn't look at me. I stood at the vending machine, the clatter of the paper cup sounding too loud in the silence, and I remembered 8th grade, the spelling bee. The word was irreversible. I added an extra S. I cried backstage. He'd hugged me all the way to the car, one arm across my shoulder, telling me how proud he was. You stood up there. That's all that matters. I looked back through the courtroom glass. That man was gone. Maybe he had been gone a long time. By the end of the session, Elise handed in the final documents. Griffin signed as a witness. I signed last. It didn't feel like power. It felt like breath after holding it for too long. He stayed seated as we filed out. He didn't call my name. Didn't ask to speak. He just watched the floor. He sat behind me, not beside me, and that was enough. There was no final scene, no dramatic speech, no slammed doors, just the sound of shoes on courthouse tile, echoing like punctuation. I walked out first, Elise behind me, Griffin holding the door but saying nothing. The air outside was still and strangely warm for late fall. I could hear birds, traffic, someone laughing across the street. Life, unbothered. Inside, Franklin stayed seated. Talia looked at me once, vacant, as if she had already started editing the story in her head, cutting this part out entirely. Janelle stood near the exit, hands folded over her clutch. We made eye contact for less than a breath. She didn't move. I didn't expect her to. I didn't wait for anyone. Back at my apartment, I unpacked the file I'd spent months building. The screenshots, the records, the quiet proofs of things no one wanted to hear. I placed them gently into a drawer, not to forget, to stop needing them. I texted Elise. We're done. Then I lit a candle. Not for symbolism, just for light, and sat. Still. For the first time, stillness didn't mean something was wrong. Griffin came by that evening with soup I didn't ask for, and a silence that felt like company, not absence. We didn't talk about court, or Franklin, or what came next. Some things don't need labels to be real. A week passed, then another. Griffin suggested visiting my dad. He was hospitalized briefly. Stress, the doctor said. I nodded but said no. I hope he heals, I told him, but not through me. That night I typed out a message to Janelle. Something neutral, something that might start something. Then I deleted it. Some things don't need to be said to be understood. Or not. I walked past the wedding venue a few days later. Not on purpose, just on the way home from the bookstore. Another couple stood out front, the bride-to-be in white jeans and a nervous smile. Her mother adjusted her hair, and someone clicked a camera just as she laughed. I kept walking. That place had given me nothing, but I'd carried everything out of it. I smiled, not because it was over, because I was still moving. "You don't belong here," she once told me, and she was right. I belong somewhere else now. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the most powerful decision you'll ever make. I spent years thinking that silence was strength, that being the bigger person meant swallowing my pain and staying small. But the truth is, silence doesn't make you stronger if it costs you your dignity. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, I want you to know, you're not alone. And you don't have to keep proving yourself to people who only see your absence as convenience. Peace isn't found in their approval. It's found in your boundaries. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you once called family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Let's make this a space where healing begins through shared truth. If this video resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me what city you're watching from. And if it didn't, that's okay too. Let me know what didn't sit right and where you're tuning in from. If you want more stories like this, real, raw, and honest, subscribe to the channel. We've got more on the way.